What is it?
The main thing I got from it was like this sense of feeling seen and validated.
Well, why does it have to be this way?
This book was placed in my hand for this moment.
Insightful, learned a lot, wrote some quotes that I'm ready to like paint on my wall.
I love this book!
That we just kind of pull out some of the big themes that we see and talk about a few different ones.
I apologize if most of my contribution has K-pop references.
Alternative book title, The Feminine Mystique Part 2. You were really just gay all along. Welcome to Book Club.
With Julia.
And Victoria.
People who may or may not have unironically said the sentence, I think juxtaposition can be generative.
And we like to be your book friends. This is a podcast for the books we just can't shut up about.
And this week we are reading Babel, or On the Necessity of Violence, An Arcane History by R.F. Kuang, a post-colonial dark academia novel set in a kind of alternate universe, early 19th century Oxford. And wow, is it so great.
But we will be talking about the entirety of this novel, spoilers included. So this is your official warning if you care about spoilers. Whether or not you've read the book, though, you are welcome to the party.
Yeah, welcome. If you'd like to support the show, you can rate, review, and subscribe on any and all podcast platforms. If you go down into the book links in the show notes, that will take you to our affiliate page on bookshop.org. In the US, UK, and Spain, you can order books on there from independent bookstores, and we get a very small kickback that helps us keep the show running. And if you'd like to join the club, join the team, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/bookclubwithjv and subscribe for as little as $3 a month. We're currently saving up to pay for a transcription service so we can transcribe our episodes. And our latest members-only content is our film club series where we review book to TV or book to film adaptations. And we are watching Daisy Jones and the Six. Our review, the first 5 episodes are up, and then the final 5 is coming soon?
Question marks if it'll be released by the time this episode is
It might
released.
be already there. Go check. Go check our Instagram.
I realized, I don't think we talked about this on the the main podcast feed yet, but we have recently updated our website.
Oh, yeah.
And we're quite proud of it. It's got some new things. For example, we now have this customized playlist area. So if you're not sure where to start listening, if you're like, wow, this is 112 episodes, where should I start? We've kind of curated based on, how you like to read or what you're most interested in. Also, if you notice, our feed that is public ends at like 50 episodes. We have moved, just for our members, all of our old episodes over to Buy Me a Coffee. So if you're really looking to binge some real old Julia Victoria, still figuring out how to use microphones, you can find us with all of our archive episodes on Buy Me a Coffee.
The archive is officially in place. I think the archived episodes, there's a lot of hidden gems in there. There's a lot of fun stuff. There might be some popular books that you would really love to hear us talk about. It's more just like we now have a very cohesive sound and style to our episodes that we really didn't get into gear until later.
Like 2021.
Yeah, so like a year and a half ago. So we want to put our best foot forward, and that's kind of the idea. But they're all available for members if you want to go back.
Okay, so let's talk about Babel. Our author, R.F. Kuang, is an American fantasy writer. She was born in Guangzhou, China, and her family immigrated to the States when she was about 4 years old, and they lived in Dallas, Texas. Julia, you might have already read ahead, but how old did you think R.F. Kuang was?
Holy shit. I'm reading your notes right now.
Yeah, I was like, don't look ahead.
God damn it. Sorry. I mean, I didn't think she was much older than us. I probably would have guessed like 30.
Yeah. Well, she's 26.
Oh, no.
She graduated high school in 2013, which is the same year Julia and I also graduated high school.
Oh, okay. Wow.
She moved to DC to attend Georgetown University, mainly to be there on the debate team. During her undergrad, she took a gap year to live in China and coach debate. And that was an opportunity where she spent a lot of time getting to know her grandparents more, learning about her family history. And this eventually was the inspiration for her first fantasy novel, The Poppy Wars. While she was there, I'm like, if you don't get like overachiever vibes from how she writes about academia in Babel, like it just feels like her personality. So she is in China to live abroad for a year, teaching debate, but it's only, quote unquote, only a 9-to-5 job. And she suddenly doesn't have homework for the first time in her life. So she sets a goal to write 2,000 words every day.
Oh my God.
So in 3 months, she finished her first manuscript. She then got a literary agent, and on her 20th birthday, the book went to auction and sold to Harper Voyager, which is an imprint of HarperCollins.
20?
When she's 20.
Oh God. So if you think about, like, she's a year younger than us. Where were we when we were 20? Was that junior year? So we were in England.
Yes.
Wow. Babies.
Our gap year, not gap year, we were studying, we were writing papers, but our time abroad was not as literarily fruitful, though I am very proud of the essays I wrote while there.
Yeah. Some of her best work.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So The Poppy Wars is a trilogy. The next 2 books of the trilogy were released in quick succession. So the first book came out in 2018, and then 2019, 2020, the trilogy was concluded. And during this time, Kuang wasn't just writing books. She didn't like finish undergrad and then only become a writer. She has a master's of philosophy in Chinese studies from Cambridge. She completed that in 2019. A Master's of Science in Contemporary Chinese Studies from Oxford that she completed in 2020, and is now pursuing her PhD in East Asian Languages and Literature at Yale.
So the books, the trilogy that came out, 2018, 2019, 2020, those were written while she was doing a master's degree?
Yeah.
I'm gonna cry.
To be fair, though, a lot of what she's reading and researching and writing about for her master's program is about literature, Asian American literature, about the Chinese history, the Chinese diaspora, which was super influential, not only in Babel, which we see literally set in Oxford, all about history of language translation and things like that. But Poppy Wars is all about like the Sino-Japanese War and the impact on Chinese families. But it told in a fantasy setting. I haven't read The Poppy Wars, but that's kind of what like put her on the map. So the book we're talking about today, Babel, or The Necessity of Violence in Arcane History, came out in August of 2022, so last August. And Kuang's next book, Yellowface, which sounds riveting, completely different than other things that she's written, will be released later this year in 2023. Yellowface is the story of a white author who steals the manuscript of an Asian American writer who dies in a freak accident, and then she tries to pass it off as her own. Fascinating. The book cover also looks so cool. I love like the little eyes that like look to the corner. And according to her Substack post, Kuang has a whole slew of books in the fire that she's cooking up. And she's already signed 2 to HarperCollins, another fantasy novel and another historical fiction novel.
Does she sleep?
We don't know.
All that research you did and you're not sure if she sleeps.
No notes on her sleep habits. Coming into this episode, Kuang is one of those authors where I want to read. I just want to see how she progresses. I'm like so excited for her, and I want to keep reading along. One article that I read, Kuang mentions how she's never gone back and reread The Poppy Wars since she handed in her like final. And she's like, I'm terrified to go back and reread it because that's how I learned how to write, was writing that trilogy. And she's like, I'm afraid I'm going to find things I don't like about it. And it's really incredible to watch someone who's like not only an incredible writer with really fascinating stories to tell, but also continuing to push herself and doesn't seem to be like waiting until anything is perfect to put it out there. You know, like put it out there, publish the book, get the feedback, write another book, publish it, get the feedback, write another book, instead of like, I don't know, I think there's sometimes that like hesitancy to like edit because you don't want to like put your writing out there in the world. But just her sentiment of like, yeah, the Poppy Wars put me on the map. I'm proud of them. They got me where I am, but I know I've grown so much like since then. I think that's a really great like growth mindset for a writer to have. Yeah,
I'm stoked to see what she's writing in like 10 years. By that point is going to be like a master of her craft.
And someday Julie and I we're going to stop being shocked when someone our age has accomplished like things. We get older and older and it's like, yeah, people do things in their 20s on a public platform. And we're like, no. No. How can they?
Oh my God. I see people getting married and I still think a child bride. Like yeah, anyone who accomplishes anything, I'm like, incredible. Great. How? Anyway,
Anyways.
we should summarize this book because this summary is so long. I did not fully appreciate just how dense in terms of like plot this book is. It did not fully hit me until I tried to summarize it. And I'm like, I'm barely skimming the surface, and this is like a whole page. So here we go. Babel covers the story of Robin Swift from adolescence through young adulthood until his death at the end of the novel. Spoiler. Spoiler alert, they die. So it is both the history of like the fall of Babel, which is sort of the title, but also the story of Robin Swift's life. So in a sort of alternative universe, early 19th century Oxford, where translators can do a kind of magic by harnessing the power of linguistic ambiguity and channeling it through silver. In this world, young Oxford students are sort of conscripted from all over the British Empire and trained from a very young age in a variety of languages in order to become translators to do this magic and fuel the engine of imperialism. The cohort that we follow most closely consists of Victoire, who's born in Haiti. She left Haiti before their independence and was raised as the daughter of a servant in France. Letty, the only daughter of a British general who's trying desperately to prove her father wrong and gain respect. There's Rami, who's from Calcutta, which is East India on the border with Bangladesh, which I don't think Bangladesh had independence at this point, so it was all together. Whose precocious personality and language skills convince his parents' boss/master person to take him back to England to train him to be a translator. And Robin, a boy born in Canton, which is southern China, it's where they speak Cantonese, yes, who loses all of his family to a cholera outbreak and is, quote-unquote, saved, very suspiciously, by Professor Lavelle. Lavelle?
That's so funny to me. I have been inserting a W in my mind between, it's like Lovewell is what I've been saying in my head. Lovewell. This entire time. I think on all my handwritten notes, I think it's Lovewell. I'm shook. I misread that every single time. And I'm like, this is like a weird name for him, especially because he does not love well. It felt very Dixonian, like it is not a surprise that Kuang read a lot of Charles Dickens as she was writing this book. And so it felt very like Dixonian to have a character named like Lovewell who's like actually terrible at loving and is not capable of love from what we can tell.
You did a whole analysis of his name.
I wrote a whole essay. Do you want to see it now?
It's not his real name. Oh my god.
This is like me showing up to class and making a whole argument about a character to a professor. And then the professor looks at me and was like, interesting take. But that character does die. But I hadn't done all the reading, so I didn't know the character died.
I'm gonna call him Lavelle, because Lovell feels weird. Who we later learn is his father, who takes Robin back to London. And Robin is our sort of central main character, whose point of view we follow very closely. So, in fact, Robin is not Professor Lavelle's first offspring. He had Robin and a secret older son named Griffin, and there's maybe more, it's vaguely implied. He had these kids specifically so that he could have legal custody over fluent Chinese speakers and could just use them to help gain an upper hand in the trade war that England is waging with China, which is fucked up on so many levels. So after Robin helps Griffin, before he really knows who he is, Griffin then recruits Robin to help with a secret anti-colonial society called Hermes. Robin hesitantly helps at first. When it gets too dangerous, he backs out for a while. But by the end of his time at Oxford, he becomes fully immersed in the people and cause of Hermes because he realizes it's crucial for himself and the world. So Robin, Victoire, Rami, and Letty are a cohort of classmates. And they experience their first 2 years of school as this kind of trauma bonding, connecting over their shared experience of being outsiders to the extremely white male upper class Oxford and the difficulty of their classes. They're just being students, but also dealing with racism and colonialism and sexism. But there are always these kind of underlying tensions and lots of fights due to the different degrees of oppression they experience and how best they think it should be dealt with. Do you kind of go the respectability politics route? Do you try to fight? Do you try to avoid people? And they also fight because Letty really wants to date Rami, but Rami is in love with Robin, but they'll literally die before they acknowledge that that is happening.
And also, I think a piece of that, too, is that Letty, as a white woman, like, Rami knows that that would be dangerous for both of them if he was to, like, be seen with her.
Okay, do you want to pick it up from here?
Yeah. There's this gradual loss of innocence that Robin, Victoire, and Rami experience when they realize why and how they were brought to Oxford. They are really not considered people, merely like tools of the Empire. We get it in pieces, but also in big chunks when we realize, like, oh, Professor Lovell has an entirely different family of his, like, white British wife and the children he actually acknowledges. He literally, like, doesn't explicitly tell Robin for so many years, like, yes, I am your father. The students are all given lots of, like, comforts and privileges to make them comfortable and complacent in exchange for signing away their personhood and turning their backs on their homelands. So translation magic and silver, which are all controlled in the tower, the tower is literally called Babel. All of this keeps England and the British Empire running. It's what's powering their armies and funding their expeditions. This is a harsh thing for them to wake up to, and we learn that all three of them had by this point not always known to each other, but become active in the Hermes Society. So it's a pivotal point after 3 years of schooling. They all go on a sea voyage to Canton with Professor Lovell on what is meant to be a training expedition, but it's really a chance for Robin to give the British an upper hand in the war that Professor Lovell is actively trying to start with China for his own invested interests in the opium trade. Instead, Robin has a very dramatic and painful reconnection with his home that he hasn't been to in like 10 years. And he realizes just how culpable he is now in the destruction of his, and also by extension Rami's, homes. When he does meet with a Chinese general the next day to translate, he's very direct and honest about the British intentions. And so this leads to the Chinese burning opium in the harbor as kind of like a, we're not going to deal with you anymore, to the British. A direct confrontation between Robin and his father. And in a moment of anger, Robin uses silver to kill Professor Lovell.
So the 4 students now have to hide a body and pretend to be innocent, which they are very bad at.
If it wasn't like so intense, it would be so humorous. I mean, it still is humorous.
Yeah. They're so bad at it. And once they get back to Oxford, they are very quickly found out. And so they have to be rescued by the Hermes Society, basically. But once this happens, Letty is sort of forced to see the world from the other people's point of view, and murder and revolution are sort of where she draws the line. In her allyship, and she's gradually freaking out more and more and more until she sort of rats them all out to the police and personally kills Rami. So only Robin and Victoire are left.
Yeah, all the Hermes Society is also murdered in this police invasion.
Griffin was away, so he's able to rescue Robin and Victoire, but when he breaks them out of prison, he ends up dying. So Robin, having lost both Rami, the love of his life, and Griffin, his only brother, is now a bit unhinged. So they decide to take over Babel and see how many translators they can convince to go on strike with them and like freeze all management and production of silver in the tower until the government agrees to back out of the war with China. This goes over surprisingly easily, and some working class people who have lost their jobs to silver also show up to kind of help on the ground, and they set up a barricade. Over the next period of time, all of Oxford and London and like the whole of England just start to fall apart because they're not maintaining the silver anymore. Because the capitalism of the machine dictated that they make the silver as shitty as possible so that they constantly have to replace it. And so it goes out of commission really fast until Westminster Bridge in London like fully collapses. And a lot of people die. And yet no measures by Parliament are made to stop the war in any way. So Robin decides that they're like, this isn't enough, this isn't working. He decides that Babel has to be fully destroyed in order to make sure that they can't go to war, even if they want to. And so Babel has to be destroyed from the inside. They like explode all the silver. And so Robin and some of the fellow strikers agree to help, while Victoire and a couple others decide to escape and try to go back to their homelands. So as the tower is crumbling in on him, as Robin is dying, he finally realizes that he's in love with Rami, and he sees his mother calling his name, and then cut to black. And I have like shot for shot exactly how I think that scene would go. Like, I can go make it right now. I can go film that scene right now. I know exactly what I would do. And Victoire gets her POV chapter is sort of the epilogue. And so she's going to kind of carry on the story. Oh my
Good job. There's a lot in this book.
So what was your experience with it? Because that's a doozy.
Yeah, last December, I had a very fun task at work of picking out books as end of year gifts for some colleagues. And I was browsing some like best fantasy of 2022 lists. I saw Babel and read the premise. I was like, oh, this sounds fascinating. I don't know if that was the first time I saw it, but it was the first time I deeply considered it. So I did get it on behalf of an organization I work for, got it for a coworker. I also bought it for Julia. I think probably because I knew you had also sent it to me as a book you're interested in. And then I also bought it for myself. I bought it twice. I bought it in hardback. And then I was going out of the country. So I bought it on ebook. And yeah, so you're welcome, HarperCollins and R.F. Kuang. I have given way more money to you for these books than I really intended to.
This is your red, white, and royal blue.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. So I was really excited to read it. I was completely enamored by the world building and the characters in this novel. I was honestly afraid of reading it too fast because I was having such a good time. I'm also such a nerd. I freaking love school. And like some of my favorite parts of the Harry Potter series, especially as a kid, was when they go to class.
Yeah.
And I got to hear what they're learning in their magic classes. I was like, this is so cool. And this was like this, but better because it was like linguistic theory. So I felt like I got to go to a linguistics course while reading this novel, and I loved the banter. I loved the footnotes. Oh my God, the footnotes. It was like context and history and like asides and like entire subplots in a footnote, and it was delightful. By the end of the book, I had some pretty large critiques, especially of the structure and the pacing, the narrative point of view, which we will get into in this episode. But overall, I enjoyed it. I was trying to figure out how I feel about this book, and I couldn't figure out a way to say it without feeling like condescending. I'm not trying to be condescending, but like I love this so much, I want the best for it. Like I've read many books where I like, oh, I see some like structural issues with this book. It was fine, moving on, and then I kind of forget about it. Like the tier of books that are not even noteworthy enough for me to like list am I currently obsessed on these episodes. Like we're not going to do an episode on it. I was just like, oh, I read it. It was fine, whatever. This book, I'm like, even though I see some like structural issues with it, I'm so enamored with it that I like want to see it be its best self.
It's like our friend. We've befriended this book. We now are emotionally invested in its well-being. Totally agree. This book is a language nerd's paradise. We, I think, both had a blast when they went to class. Because it's like stuff that we talk about. Like some of the conversations in here were like conversations that you and I have had about language, about translation, it was just, I just gobbled it up. Yeah, I read this in basically 2 sittings, which is crazy given the size of the book. I read the first half on the flight to New York, and then the second half on the flight back to Brussels. It looked really intimidating at first, but I was like amazed. I would just like fly through it, and how I was so excited by the translation theory and like the difficult dilemmas of capitalism and imperialism that it was posing. Like it was just all stuff that my brain really wanted to chew on. And I was taking so many notes, just so excited by the ideas. Like I'm really invested in the characters and the plot, but like the ideas are what really got me really excited. And then the second half I was like crying the whole time. And I do remember being like, how is there so much book left? I thought we were at the end. Everyone's dead. Like, what is there left to do? And then you get to book 5 and it's like, oh, this is actually what the story is about, which is what we'll get to in a minute. But it's a really bizarre kind of reading experience because it feels like there's like 2 climaxes in a way. So yeah, I feel so emotionally attached to this book. And to this author, I want to read everything she's written. Very, very well done. But I want to make it even better, if that makes sense. I want to make it even better. I think it could be perfect. And right now it's just really, really good. For our discussion, as we've both said, I want to preface by saying, we loved this book. It was incredible. We cried. I, Julia, want to see a film or miniseries made of this immediately.
There's so much in here that's described in ways that like, oh, this would be such a great beat. This would be such a good moment. This would be so good visually because it's described so beautifully in the book. Like you just want to see it come to life just to like gratify our own love.
Yeah. Like I think that would sort of allow for like the completion of any remaining questions we might have. Because I think some of our critiques could be fixed if we could just see it visually. It could be fixed by like having another actor on screen playing all of the points of view that we don't normally get, you know? And it's like a stunning piece of post-colonial critique and in translation theory, and which is impressive to make that exciting and interesting. You know, it's exactly what we want like storytelling to be and to do. Okay, so we loved it. However, we have some thoughts. And what we sort of landed on is like, maybe it should be more than one book. Probably 2. You could make a case for 3 if you expanded certain sections, but at least 2. Partly because we loved it and we want more, but we're going to get into, so there's some storytelling and style and character development choices that I think could be fixed or improved by making it more than one book and kind of creating more space and more room for the story to breathe. And like, as you saw in the outline, like there's so much crammed into, that was one book. Well, we just took half an hour describing.
I know, usually the summary of our episode is like 5-10 minutes on a summary.
Yeah.
We just spent so much time
on
that summary.
So much time. But it's like also crucial in order to be able to talk about what we want to talk about that we get the basics. Like that was just the basics.
I know. There's so much in there too. I was like, oh, and don't forget, Julia, this part happened. But I'm like, no, I see why you left it out of your summary. We don't have time for that detail. Which is also, I feel like, how a lot of this book was written. It's like, we don't have time to get into it. But here, let me give you a summary. So this is a little bit of our theory of how we think the book was written. This is not based off any interviews with the author or the publisher or anything. This is just based off of our reading of the text. It kind of feels like the book was written a bit with like the final section in mind, which is the strike and the fall of Babel. And then the author had to work backwards from there to give it like enough backstory for it to matter to people and that the world would make sense. And it turns out she had to go very, very far back. And I think at some point, I don't know when, but it was like, oh, now this is a Bildungsroman. Like we need to go all the way back to the beginning. Because I think another choice, which you and I haven't really discussed much, another choice could have been to pick up in year 2 or 3 and then tell everything else in flashbacks.
Right.
But to start the action, the boots on the ground action in the 3rd year. But because we get this like very Charles Dickens, Bildungsroman, so like a coming of age story, that's the fancy literary term for it. We do have to go back to kind of the beginning, you know, it's the beginning of Robin's interaction with Professor Lovell. We do have a couple pieces of evidence that kind of support this. One, the title is on the necessity of violence. And when Julia reminded me that was this like subtitle on the cover page, not on the cover of the book, but on like the first page, I was like, oh, right. But we don't really get debates about whether or not violence is necessary until like the last 5th of the book.
Yeah.
Like pretty far in there. And additionally, this does come from the author, but the author calls the novel a book about a strike. HarperCollins, ironically, the publisher of this book, their editors went on strike and Kuang showed up at the strike. When Julia sent me the TikTok, or I sent you the TikTok about Kuang joining on strike, she's like, I wrote a book and it's about a strike. And I was halfway through this book and I was like, this book is not about a strike. I don't understand. And then I got to the end and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it is about a strike. But that's another reason why I'm like, did Kuang start there? Or, I mean, also she was making a statement publicly in support of the HarperCollins union strike. So it would make sense that she would draw that comparison and describe her book that way.
But yeah, it's like, clearly to her, that is the inevitable thing that the book is building towards, kind of the centerpiece. Even though as you're reading it, it feels like it kind of comes out of nowhere. Because everyone's already dead and you think it's going to be this thing with the Hermes Society, but it's actually, I don't know, it feels like you've already had this big conflict. And then there's another one. Like maybe she just realized she had a bit more book than she bargained for and was still trying to fit it all into one. Because like with Poppy War, it seems like she planned on writing 3. And this one she did not. One of the things that you lose out on when you have a book that big that tries to cover that amount of time with that many plot points and that many characters is you have to tell a lot of the story in summary. The only things, I have a writing professor who describes it as like boots on the ground. I don't know who first coined that, but it's sort of basically saying that we have our feet in reality in real time, rather than watching it in summary, kind of like a montage, you know? So we're not talking about the past, but we're in the present seeing it happen. And the only time we are boots on the ground is when we need that conversation or that event to happen in order to further the plot. There's nothing that's like, I mean, not to make another Harry Potter reference, fuck J.K. Rowling, but one of the things that those books do well is kind of the day-to-day life of being at school, which you do get in the midst of all of this plot happening. But there's 7 books, so she's got room, it's a book a year, she's got room for them to like go to class and play sports and do dumb shit. And I feel like that's a natural comparison that your brain makes when you're reading this book.
No, I feel that too, because it's a book about going to school and magic, and so it's easy to make that comparison. I think also what's part of it too is that the stakes heighten as the book progresses, right? So like in the beginning, the stakes are, is Robin going to help Griffin out? Is he going to steal silver?
And, like, is he gonna fit in?
Yeah, is he gonna fit in? Is he gonna make friends? Is he gonna feel like he has a place in Oxford? And that is important. It's the most difficult thing he's going through at the time. Mm-hmm. However, by the end of the book, it has expanded to he is trying to, like, change the world, like, fundamentally change how things are done.
Yeah.
And he has now killed people. He has seen people die. And he even questions, like, if he wants to be alive anymore. This book is definitely more adult than the Harry Potter series is. But yeah, I think it's more than just like there's school and there's magic to compare to Harry Potter. I feel like we watch this young boy develop into a man.
And he's like an outsider.
And go through shit. Yeah.
So then what we miss out on is like Robin and his friends being happy together. Or even like, not necessarily happy, but like being friends. Mm-hmm. We barely get any of those sort of little day-to-day moments of like eating breakfast together or making decisions about what they're going to do, where they're going to study, like going to class. Like we only get the classrooms where things that are important for us to understand the plot of the book get told. Like it's all plot driven. And so we don't get to like luxuriate in them being outsiders at Oxford and like making their way through and the good times. We barely get any good times. We're told that the times are good or that the times are bad, but we don't really see them. And so I feel like it really limits how much we can buy into their bond and their happiness, particularly with Rami and Victoire.
So here's a couple examples of what we mean. So here's a scene that we have boots on the ground. This is the thing that's actually happening, as real time as this book is, even though we're not saying they switched to present tense, but real time. One last thing, Professor Playfair said as he accompanied them down the stairs. "We'll need to take your blood." "I beg your pardon?" asked Letty. "Your blood. It won't take long." Professor Playfair led them through the lobby to a small, windowless room hidden behind the shelves, which was empty save for a plain table and 4 chairs. He gestured for them to sit, then strode to the back wall where a series of drawers were concealed inside the stone. He pulled out the top drawer, revealing stacks and stacks of tiny glass vials within. Each one was labeled with the name of the scholar whose blood it contained. "It's for the wards," Professor Playfair explained. "Babel sees more robbery attempts than all of the banks in London combined. The doors keep most of the riffraff out, but the wards need some way to distinguish scholars from intruders. We've tried hair and fingernails, but they're too easy to steal." "Thieves can steal blood," said Rami. "They can," said Professor Playfair, "but they'd have to be much more determined about the whole endeavor, wouldn't they?" He pulled a handful of syringes from the bottom drawer. "Sleeves up, please." Reluctantly, they pushed up their gowns. "Shouldn't we have a nurse in here?" asked Victoire. "Don't you worry," Professor Playfair tapped the needle. "I'm quite good at this. Won't take me too long to find a vein. Who's first?" So we get this scene where the characters are interacting in real time, we get a little commentary back and forth, but it's also very explicitly telling us how it works that they have security in this building, which becomes an important plot point in the book. When people get kind of banished from the tower, their vials get smashed so they can't come back in. This is also important why Hermes Society has to recruit current students to be able to steal things from the tower. So we have this very important plot moment that's told to us in real time. But a lot of these other moments in summary, this is around the same time, like within a few pages of that scene I read. So it was Rami, Letty, and Victoire who became such constant interlocutors that Robin started seeing Oxford through their eyes. Rami would adore that purple scarf hanging in the window of Ed and Ravenscroft. Letty would laugh herself silly at the puppy-eyed young man sitting outside Queen's Lane Coffee House with a book of sonnets. Victoire would be so excited that a new batch of scones had just been put out at Waltzing Garden, but because she would be stuck in her French tutorial until noon, Robin absolutely had to buy one, wrap it up in his pocket, and save it for her when class was let out. Even his course readings became more exciting when he began seeing them as source material for cutting observations, complaining, or humorous, to be shared later with the group. They were not without their riffs. They argued endlessly, the way bright young people with well-fed egos and too many opinions do. Robin and Victoire have a long-running debate over the superiority of English versus French literature, wherein both were oddly, fiercely loyal to their adapted countries. And that goes on for quite a while. So we're getting these details about their lives, but in summation. It's not like we don't get any character color, but we don't get a scene where, as Robin crossed the courtyard, he ran into Victoire and pulled out the scone he'd grabbed from her. And she's like, oh my gosh, Waltzing Garden, my favorite. And he's like, I remembered.
Yeah.
Or like, of course I didn't forget. You harassed me about it all week to bring you this. Or something like that. You know, like we could have gotten that little moment where that happened instead of like just in summary. But again, this is why we think it should be at least 2, if not 3 books, because it would take so many pages to have that all play out and woven into this larger story than to just give it to us in these very Charles Dickens summation flavor text.
And part of what you lose when telling everything in summary is that the reader loses the opportunity to see, quote unquote, the other characters in the moment. Because this book is in third person, but it's an extremely limited point of view. It's very, very close to Robin. It only knows what Robin knows, except for the footnotes. The footnotes are things that whoever compiled this document knows, but the action is only things that Robin knows. And Robin as a character, part of his whole character arc, is that he doesn't like conflict. He's like Victoria. He very often refuses to know or acknowledge certain things that could cause conflict. And this is an extensively documented part of his character. The very dramatic one that we get is when Robin tries to kind of separate everything he's learned about how messed up the world is from Griffin and the Hermes Society. He's trying to separate that from his life at Oxford because he finally got to be a normal kid for once with friends and like schoolwork and belonging and whatever. He's trying to keep those worlds separate. And finally, when he goes to do the thing he's being trained to do in Canton and he sees the ramifications of the opioid crisis on his own people and he realizes that they can't be separated, that he is complicit in the work that he's doing. And he sees the whole web of the British Empire in his mind. And he finally acknowledges, he's like, I didn't want to see it. I don't know how I didn't see it, but I didn't want to. And that's sort of a big sort of bursting open moment. So because we know that's something that's true about his character, that means that anything that Robin does not see, the reader also does not see. So like in that moment where he's like, I don't know how I didn't see it. I don't know how I didn't see the bigger picture. Rami is standing right there the whole time. And the description of him is so sparse. He speaks with a calm voice. He says a couple lines, but we don't see any of his physicality. And you can sort of assume from that Robin is not looking at him. Robin is looking at the water. He's in his own head. Robin's reaction to, if you look at all these different crisis moments in the story, Robin's reaction to crisis moments and conflict is to dissociate and kind of run away and go into his head. and you suddenly lose all detail about what's happening in the moment in the scene. You lose every other character's physicality, their facial expressions. So we can't see, like, I texted Victoria, like, I want a film adaptation or series of this book just so that I can see someone act Rami's part in that scene, because I need to know what he's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, okay, he's in love with Robin. They're in a fight because Robin didn't tell him that he was involved in the Hermes Society, and he's annoyed, but they're gonna get over it. Robin's having this really dramatic third eye opening kind of moment, and he stands on the edge of the river like he's gonna jump. Like,
what is Rami doing?
What is Rami doing? We don't know. Like, I need to know what he's feeling. I need to know what he's doing. There's so much that we lose when we're that close to Robin. There's a lot that we gain, but there's a lot that we lose as well. And so we think that if we could get a bit more in-scene daily life, seeing them interact, we might get a bit more of the importance of their relationships and just their characters. Like, I know you were a bit disappointed by the character development of Victoire.
Yeah. Victoire, she's the last person Robin has left. And when we get to the ending section of the book during the strike, I have this realization of like, wait, how well do you guys know each other? Like, obviously they know each other really well, but Robin has to like say like, you're such an incredible person. You're such a great friend. You're always there. They have these really intense debates about what they're going to do next. But this is like the first we really get a lot of Victoire and Robin as two friends.
Yeah.
You know, we get them in the group setting a lot. We get Letty and Victoire. We get Robin and everyone, but not really just like Robin and Victoire, the two of them. Mm-hmm. Like, if we had gotten those little beats of like, they're so close of friends that we saw this exchange where Robin like gets her favorite scones. You know, we get told that they're close, but like, how do we get, I don't know, that emotional connection? I think there's some limitations here too. And again, this was like a choice that Kuang made that I still struggle with, which is to not give these interludes, these backstories until after the reveal that Victoire and Rami are part of the Hermes Society too. But I'm like, well, duh. Like, I don't know. It didn't feel like a big reveal to me that they were part of it. It was revealed to Robin. But like, again, if we had kind of changed, by altering the narrative point of view, by widening a bit more than just Robin, we could get those little pieces to feel more connected to this character. And I'm excited that she lives at the end and she rides off on a horse to find a new life and to find freedom and to keep the Hermes Society alive however she can. That's super incredible. That's really encouraging. Like, I like that piece of hope at the end. I just wanted more from her, like, of her earlier in the book, so that I would be like thrilled that she's the one left moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. Robin's also like not very observant. And this is something Rami calls him out on, which is funny. But like, he gets the general sense that Victoire and Letty are fighting about certain things, but like, there's a lot he doesn't notice. And the choice to keep the fact that Victoire was part of the Hermes Society a secret, and the fact that she's, you know, always with Letty and they live farther away and the girls can't always go to the same places, means that she's probably the character we get the least of, because we have to get a lot of, or slightly more of, I should say, Rami and Letty fighting. We get a bit more of them real-time fighting because we have to set up the plot of Letty killing Rami and like the love triangle. So we have to see a bit more of that in real time. But Victoire gets kind of left out. So yeah, so then them being the only two people left at the end loses some of its emotional resonance.
I think this like last encounter with Robin and Victoire is like a good example of like, I wish I was shown this more than just told this. So it goes, her shoulders crumpled. Robin held her tight against him. What an anchor she was, he thought, an anchor he did not deserve. She was his rock, his light, the sole presence that had kept him going, and he wished that was enough for him to hold on to. Be selfish, he whispered. Be brave. Like, this feels like it should be a really emotionally heavy moment. And it is. When you read it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the end. He's getting ready to die. I did not feel like my reading of Victoire and Robin was the sole presence that had kept him going.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, this does not feel earned at all.
Even though we spent so much time, compared to the rest of the book, so much time in the strike, so much time just the two of them with their like other strikers, but a lot of just the two of them, like I didn't quite feel like that description was fully shown to me, just told.
And well, a lot of the strike is told in summary as well.
Yeah, there's that like whole love story with Juliana and Ibrahim. And they're like brand new characters in the last like 150 pages of the book. They fall in love, decide to die together. And we're like, what? Like,
Yeah.
if we were given a second book, a trilogy, a third book, that could have been a whole storyline. We could have gotten to know. I couldn't even picture what they looked like. Because I think we got maybe like a 3-word description of both of them.
Yeah.
That was one moment too that I was just like, the strike moves so fast, but also so slow. There's so much room there for a lot more going on, I think.
Mm-hmm. And this is something you pointed out that I was like, oh my God, yes. We need the Griffin, Evie, Sterling backstory. Oh my God. Because it's literally a footnote when it needs at least a whole chapter, like of Griffin sitting down and telling the story to Robin while they're all stuck in the Hermes Society hideout or whatever. Because there's so much tension in the scene where Griffin and Sterling like kill each other at the same time. And once Robin's father's dead, Sterling is kind of the next big villain. He's the one leading the whole like attack team. And yet we know almost nothing about him.
I had forgotten that him and Robin had met.
Yeah.
Like it was so long ago and so like not notable.
Like he's supposed to be this kind of looming presence, but he kind of comes in and out. And so we only get that footnote of the two of them and their backstory. And like we get a bit more of Griffin and Evie, but we don't know until this footnote that he was like in love with her. Like there's so much that we miss. Oh my God. Like I definitely wanted more of that.
So this is all we get of that storyline. This is Robin. He would never know, for instance, that there was a time when Griffin, Sterling, Anthony, and Evie had thought of themselves as a cohort, as eternally bonded as Robin's did, or that Griffin and Sterling had quarreled once over Evie, bright and vibrant and brilliant and beautiful Evie, or that Griffin truly hadn't meant it when he killed her. In his retellings of that night, Griffin made himself out to be a calm and deliberate murderer, but the truth was that, like Robin, he'd acted without thinking, from anger, from fear, but not from malice. He did not even really believe it would work, for Silver responded only sporadically to his command, and he didn't know what he'd done until Evie was bleeding out on the floor. Nor would he ever know that Griffin, unlike Robin, had no cohort to lean on after his act, no one to help him absorb the shock of this violence. And so he'd swallowed it, curled in around it, made it a part of himself. And while for others this might have been the first step on the road to madness, Griffin Lovell had instead whittled this capacity to kill into a sharp and necessary weapon. That's a whole book I want. I want that whole book.
Yeah. Like, what a thing to drop. Like, we're in the middle of this, like, really emotionally chaotic time. Robin's just seeing his brother die, and then we get this juicy footnote of all this backstory, and then you're just like, wait, what? And then you have to move on, and you're just like, oh my God. I don't know about you, but something that really shocked me was I felt much more upset and sad and distraught over Griffin dying than Rami, who, like, I love Rami as a character, and Griffin's, like, this kind of annoying, complicated older brother figure. But I feel like I knew more about Griffin's relationship with Ramen. with Ramen.
That's the best.
I combine... Is that their ship name?
Yeah,
Rami
that's their ship
and
name.
Robin is Ramen? Write the fanfic. I knew more about Griffin's relationship with Robin because those two had spent so much, like, real time on the page together. Whereas after the first day in Oxford, in, like, chapter, 4? It was very far back when Robin and Rami have their little date on the first day in Oxford, and it's like everything's bright and wonderful and it's beautiful. We very rarely get the two of them just being the two of them without some major plot thing. Like someone's just died, or Victoire is there as well, and they're arguing about the Hermes Society. Like, it's very rarely just the two of them in real time. Whereas with Griffin, we get a lot. So even though it's a more complicated relationship, we understand it better and we've bought into it more. We've spent more time with it, honestly. And when I finished the book, my first thought was, if the love story had been acknowledged, even in the slightest, tiniest little bit, there are feelings there, we don't have time to get into it, we'll deal with it later kind of thing, or like, I'm really pissed at you right now.
A hand touch.
Literally, do the gay pinky touch. do something, you know? Like,
I need our flag means death foot boop.
foot boop, yes, the foot boop. Oh my God. Like literally just some display of affection, of like acknowledging, hey, I'm here with you. We're a team. I have feelings that we can't talk about because of the time and the place and the conflict and whatever, but we're here for each other. If we had gotten even the tiniest bit of something like that, I think Rami's death would have felt gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
I would have been a mess. I would have been sobbing. I would have been on the floor of the airplane. People would be so concerned. I would need to go take a lap around the plane. Like, but instead, it just kind of, Robin goes numb, and then so much chaos happens, and we move on, and I felt surprised, but I didn't feel a lot until Robin's about to die, and then we get those flashbacks. And that's when I started crying. Because it's him in a scene we actually saw of him spending time with Rami and realizing how he feels.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about this.
So I think, okay, our critiques have been laid out. We've
Yeah.
laid out the main things that we think could be improved upon if we were to reconstruct these into 2 hypothetical books, or potentially 3, but we'll stick with 2 for now. Okay, so for me, my argument is that we would end book 1 after Robin kills his father, which in the existing book, the end of book 3, which is a section, the 3rd section of the book, that's where Robin kills his father, Professor Lovell. That's where I think we could end the first book. We would have the coming of age. We would have kind of the age of innocence of Robin coming into this bright and shiny Oxford, and then it tarnishes over time. I think put more emphasis on that father-son conflict as the kind of focus of book 1. Spend more time expanding the relationship between the cohort members, and continue to like heighten the tensions, give us a lot more of those details, help us track a little bit better. I think if the books were separated between like year 1, year 2, year 3 of school, you know, it would be also a little easier on our brains to figure it out. Tell us what they did over the summer. We get that in a couple sentences where they all go and like study abroad. I want to get letters back and forth between them as they're sharing about their experiences. Have Robin meet a Hermes Society member in Malacca where he's studying. Like expand, all of a sudden we're expanding how big we realize the Hermes Society is. We think it's just like Griffin, and we realize it's a few more Oxford residents. And then maybe that's when we realize, oh, this is a global thing. I think we would maybe need a bit more plot arc to end conclusively book 1 there, but that's where I think it could end. So then in book 2, it would give us more time with the Hermes Society to build relationships with, there are so many wonderful characters. I think book 2, we could also, I mean, this is a big narrative choice, but potentially weave multiple narrative points of view into the book. Instead of only being closely following Robin, maybe we take those interludes that we get of the other characters and expand them. Maybe we do get that scene where Griffin sits down and tells an entire chapter of what happened with him and his cohort. Maybe Anthony's the one that tells it because he was there too. And then really invest time in expanding the characters of the strike members. And I think part of that is just introducing them before we get to the strike. It's like a small thing, but a big thing.
Yeah.
Is the fact that the professors have been introduced, but all the students that are part of the strike, besides Robin and Victoire, were not introduced earlier because we didn't have time. We only had time to introduce the older Hermes Society members, and then literally no one younger than Robin and his cohort. So by year 4, they know none of the other students, supposedly, which I don't read as very realistic, that you just like don't know anyone else at your school. That's my argument. Where would you chop up the book?
I'm very torn about this because it's a very convincing argument, and I do think the murder of his father makes a very good end of a book. But I feel like the first book needs to end right before they get on the boat, because just the structurally having the first half of your plot take place in one place and the second half take place in another place is just story-wise very difficult. So part of me is now thinking book 2 needs to be just the boat, and we just need to open that up a lot more, because that would make a really great book 2 where we're expanding the world because we're literally leaving and going somewhere else. But they would need to do a lot more than what we get, obviously. But they spend like 3 or 4 months there and back. Like, that's a lot of time. You can do a lot of plot with that. Anyway, so it would be a boat book. And then when they come back, it would end with the murder of his father. And then when they come back, it would be the Hermes Society and I keep wanting to call it a siege. It's a strike.
You know what I think would also be interesting if you did a book 2 that was just on the boat? I think we got a really interesting character arc of Letty, like getting more details about her, where we really think when she's left England, when she's in a different place, that she is seeing the world as her friends see it, that she is having these like eye-opening experiences. But when she comes back to Britain and she's back, and maybe give her some closer ties to some other British people.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit more of like the pressure she's feeling from her inner circle, like the society she comes from. If we get more than just, I'm trying to prove myself to my dad, I can't let him down, I'm also oppressed because I'm a woman, but also now I'm gonna backstab all my friends because I don't totally understand. Like, I feel like she's got enough there, but I think we could really live into that, and that could be really fascinating as well to explore if you did a second book. And I think your comment about beginning and ending, you think it'd be odd to end book 1 on the boat?
I think it's odd to have, which I guess then if I cut off book 1 before they get on the boat, I would have to deal with the same problem in book 2.
But here's the thing, is because book 1 opens in Canton.
Right.
So if we maybe have the murder happen not on the boat, I don't know. But maybe the murder has to happen on the boat so they can get home. Somewhere in there, because it could begin and end in China is what I'm saying. Is you could have beginning and ending in China, and then book 1 opens back in Britain, and we skip over the voyage part. If the murder can happen somewhere else.
Right. Okay. I could see that. Instead of it happens when they're on the boat, he just confronts him in like the place they're staying or something. For me, I feel like, because generally what the stories we're telling, right? The first one is kind of the loss of innocence story, the coming of age story. And the second half is roughly it's a revolution story. We've got 2 very different stories here. I think a very good end to the loss of innocence story could be the end of third year exams and the ball that they go to, where it's like the last time that they try to pretend to be part of everyone else, and it's really bad. And that's also where the tension of the love triangle sort of reaches its climax as well. Letty finally understanding that Rami doesn't want her, and Rami and Robin having this moment, and there's just a lot of themes that come to a head at the ball after their year 3 exams. They find Evie's grave, and there's sort of these looming things that you could then cliffhangers you could pick up on in the next story. Part of what I would do with the first book would be the completion of the love story. Like that would be the second major arc, aside from the loss of innocence. Yeah, but then maybe too much in book 2, I don't know. So maybe what I'm proposing would be 3 books. And if you wanted to do 2, you would cut it off when he kills his father. So editors, filmmakers, we're doing your job for you.
So yeah, those are kind of our initial thoughts of like, I shouldn't say initial. We've discussed this at length.
Yeah, you can tell.
Our ideas of maybe a different way to structure this book. Again, recognizing that what we love so much are these characters. Mm-hmm. It is such an interesting plot with so many important and fascinating conversations about language, about imperialism, about colonialism. And that's why I think like I have this like, oh man, like I want to just live in this book longer. And one way I can do that is reimagine it, is continue to reimagine it, you know, whether it's on the screen or in a trilogy or something like that.
Yeah, and I feel like if the final book had more space and we had gotten to know all the characters involved more, the strike would feel so much bigger and so much heavier, and watching the impact of it, of like they're doing it, this is what they've been building towards, they're taking down the empire kind of thing. I think it would feel huge and really emotionally resonant. So a lot of the things that we loved could be heightened, I think, by what we're suggesting. We just want more of what we love, that's all.
So for those who enjoyed this book, what would you recommend they check out next?
I would recommend The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's part of a cycle that I always forget the name of, about like different societies on different planets. It's very anthropological, but this one in particular is like an anarchist society, and it's very post-colonial critique, and so I feel like very much like an emotional ancestor to this book.
I would recommend, if you're interested in more dark academia that also talks about race, I would recommend Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Amide. It's a lot shorter. It takes place in a U.S. like private high school. I would also recommend, we just finished releasing episodes on the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. If you haven't read those and you're looking for a fantasy read and you're like, I want more than one book.
Mm-hmm.
That's a trilogy I would definitely recommend. Okay, and our final segment of the day, currently obsessed. What are the things that are bringing you joy?
I recently discovered a new podcast called Fangirl Central, and it's like two sisters who are like our age who are obsessed with a lot of things. So they talk about their own fandoms, but also like the phenomenon of being a fangirl and that kind of culture and how the culture talks about it. And it just makes you feel very much at home. Woods has a new album. He's like Korean pop rock. It's so good. It's his best work to date for sure. And then I went to the thrift store on Tuesday to try and find a jacket for the August D concert I'm going to next week. And I ended up finding like two sort of couture pieces for like $20 each.
That's amazing.
It was crazy. Like the thrift gods were smiling on me. I had some crazy luck. I got a sweater and a jacket, and I love both things I bought. So how about you? You did not have good shopping luck this week.
No, I did not have good shopping luck this week, but I did find some platform sandals I will wear with a dress for a wedding that I'm going to. It'll be great. I found in the end mostly what I was looking for. It was just a difficult journey to get there. But what I am really into right now, while I was on this shopping trip from hell, I was listening to the podcast Bad Dates with Jamila Jamil. I really enjoy Jamila Jamil's podcast I Weigh, which is usually a lot more serious conversations. Mm-hmm. And Bad Dates is just really fun. It's like 2 or 3 people telling stories about terrible dates they went on. Some of them, I love the twist at the end is that this terrible date is like with the person they're now married to. So it's not always like a first date bad story. It's just like people in relationships having a time. And yeah, that one's bringing me joy these days. I listen to most things Jamila Jamil puts out there.
Yeah.
I like her podcasting. All
right. Well, we got to get Victoria to a work meeting in like 2 minutes. So
I know, but this has been a delight. I'm so glad we got to talk about this book. And
me too.
And we didn't say it at the top, but this is one of those books that we actually read at the same time, which was incredible, where we got to like go back and forth and be like, have you got to this part yet? Have you got to this part yet? Usually one of us has read the book weeks, maybe months before the other one has. And so you're just sitting there waiting with all your thoughts until the other person finishes reading
Stewing in your feelings.
Yeah, but I could like turn off airplane mode once I landed in Ecuador and be like, oh my gosh, Julia. And we got to like geek out about it together.
This was really fun. So tell us how you would divide the book and how you would adapt it maybe. What would you do with this book? We'll see you guys next time.
Happy reading.
Thank you for listening to Book Club with Julia and Victoria. We would love to hear your thoughts on this book or the topic we discussed, so you can share your review and recommendations with us on Instagram at BookClubWithJV, on our website, bookclubwithjv.com, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also visit our website for show notes with links to all of the recommendations and the things bringing us joy. If you don't already, go ahead and follow us on whichever podcast platform you are listening on so that you can be notified when our next episode is released. This episode was co-hosted and produced by myself, Victoria Bruick, along with Julia Clausen. Rebecca Gasme provides us with project management support. Our music is composed by Greg Bruick, and our logo was designed by Gabby Febland. Until next time, happy reading.